Thanks for having me. Thanks for caring about things. It's kind of funny. So yeah, I want to talk to you about this idea that I call present shock, which, I'm in theory, I'm this important media theorist person, but the idea for present shock actually came to me while I was watching The Real Housewives of Orange County. I don't know if you've seen that show. I don't watch it by choice, but my wife watches it, and if I'm going to watch TV with her, I watch that. But I watch television the way a media theorist watches television. So I'm looking for the communications patterns and things like that. So what worried me, really, for the year or more I watched this program was, why are these women having so many communications lapses? Why is it so hard for them to make sense to one another? This is basically a show about women who go out to lunch together, have miscommunications and arguments and fights, and then try to make up or not. And it didn't make sense because these women, they speak the same language, they have the same socioeconomic background, the same culture, they live in the same place, they have the same values. And then I realized the reason why they misunderstand each other so much is because they've had so much over-the-top plastic surgery, so much Botox injected into their faces that the women, they can't make facial expressions that are consonant with the things they're actually saying to one another. Right, so one of them will say, oh, my daughter's going in for cancer testing. And the other one says, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. And it's true, though. And then the first one, they'll put her up on a stool later, and she'll say, oh, I know she didn't really feel that way. And what I realized was, this is really a misapplication of technology. That in a desperate effort to kind of lock down their age at a supposed age 29 or 39, they've made themselves unavailable to the moment that they're actually in. Right? They can't use the 94% of human communication that happens non-verbally. All they've got is their words. Right? And this is really, it's what I call present shock. It's a confusion between the two really Greek ideals for time, these Greek notions of time. They had two words for time. One was chronos, which is time on the clock. What time did you crash the car? I crashed the car at 4:17 p.m. And then this other idea of time called kairos, which is the human time. It's a kind of a readiness time. It would be, what time do you tell Dad that you crashed the car? Right, 4:23? No, it's timing, right? You tell your dad you crashed the car after he's had his drink and before he's opened the bills, right? That's kairos. That's human time that only people can understand, and it's not generic, it's not on the clock, it's not a number, right? So what these women have done is, by trying to lock down time at age 29, in chronos of 29, they've made themselves unavailable to kairos, to the real time, to the readiness of the moment they're in. How do I show compassion for this other person? How do I be right here at age 63 with my friend whose daughter may have cancer? You can't do that one. That one's not there anymore because you're stuck in this old stupid time. Right now, this is exactly the problem that we are making as we implement technology here in the 21st century. When I first encountered the internet, this is back when my publisher was canceling my book. When I first encountered the internet in the late 80s and early 90s, I was a slacker, right? I was a kid out of college who didn't want to be one of the yuppie scum, and we slackers were looking for slack, really, which is what was another word for time. So we wanted to work as little as possible for as much money as possible, so we'd have more time to do weird things and read philosophy and play music and do all that. And when I first encountered computers and the internet, like my friends, we all thought this was going to give us more slack. We were all going to get to work from home on our own projects, in our underwear, right, on the weekends, and then play the rest of the time. And the reason why we thought that is because this is an asynchronous technology. Digital technology lives outside time. The way we first used it, we would be on these things called electronic bulletin boards. There was a great one called The Well. This was in the very early days, before the net was even called the internet. And the beauty of these systems was they gave us more time to come up with things. The way the net worked back then is you would turn on your computer, you would put in a telnet program, you'd plug the computer into this thing called a modem. I mean, you're old like me, you remember. The modem, which would go to a phone line, you'd dial into a server, and you would download the conversation that was up on the server. Then you disconnect from the internet, and in your own time, you would read the conversation and think about, how do I want to participate? And you would spend an hour, 2 hours, or overnight writing one paragraph that was going to enter into this conversation with people who you didn't even think of as your peers. These were great scientists and thinkers, and you would craft this perfect paragraph. You'd sound as brilliant as, Buckley or Christopher Hitchens or someone. You had the language, you had it down, and then you'd upload it and send it off, and it was like chess by mail. And because you had so much time, because you exploited the asynchronicity of these conversations, you sounded smarter online than you did in real life. Right? Imagine that. The internet was a place where people got to be smarter than they were in real life because they leveraged the discontinuity. They leveraged the asynchronous quality of the time. But then what happened? The internet became the poster child of the NASDAQ stock exchange. We decided the internet was going to save the economy after the 1987 biotech boom and bust. So we changed the bias of the technologies. Instead of using these technologies to create more time for us, we use them as a way to extract time as value from us. Right now we're living in the attention economy, where the only marketable, the only limited thing are human eyeball hours. And so we develop applications and websites that are sticky, that can extract time from us. And now we've got these always-on internet devices in our pockets, pinging us every time there's a Facebook update or a tweet or a CNN says that someone won a horse race. They're pinging us and interrupting us. We live in a state of perpetual emergency interruption that used to only be endured by 911 operators or air traffic controllers. And they did it 4 hours at a time, and they got medication for it, right? We're supposed to live this way as a way of being, as a feature of the digital technology rather than the problem of it. And it's no wonder we end up in a kind of a psychic neurological breakdown where we think our cell phone is vibrating in our pocket even though it's sitting over there on the shelf. It's called phantom vibration syndrome, right? And this is not an adaptation, this is maladaptation to technology. And it's because of the way that we're programming it, right? Where we end up, instead of creating more time for ourselves, we end up pinging ourselves really to death. The only time when I was a kid, the only time I would get an emergency interruption in media, it was because, a president had been shot or something. Or when you're on the phone, what we now call waiting, those were, remember the operator would break in on a phone call, an emergency, and it was because grandma was dying. Right? Can you imagine your body is now telling you, bzz, 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 grandma's dying, grandma's dying, grandma's dying. She's not dying, someone tweeted your name, right? It's crazy. But it's also a cultural moment, right? There's a cultural moment that goes along with this present shock. But there's really two features to present shock. One is the fact that we're living in a digital media environment, which is fundamentally different from the analog media environment. Just think about the difference between the analog clock and the digital clock. When I was a kid, I had this great analog alarm clock, and I would go to sleep and I'd watch, you'd watch the second hand go around each minute, and each minute was like a little mini narrative drama. Here's the beginning of a new minute, and now we're coming around the bend. Oh, it's halfway over, and now we're coming. Oh, 901, 901, 901, 902, we're here. It's a new minute, it's fresh. When my dad replaced my alarm clock with the digital one, and it's like 901, 902, and it was the kind with the little, the things that flaps down. I mean, what is that? Boom, boom. Right, so your whole experience of time moves from this sort of circular, round, analog thing to durations. Here's a duration of precisely 1 minute. Here's a duration of precisely another minute. So we have this digital environment that we're living in, a digital temporal environment. At the same time, we had a huge discontinuity as we moved from the 1900s to the 2000s. There was all of this anticipation, but millennial fever and the dot-com boom and the Y2K bug, and when they thought planes were going to, KLM grounded their fleet on the last night of 1999 because they thought the planes were going to fall out of the sky. When the computers went over from 1999 to 2000. There was this sense of where are we going, this leaning forward, this expanding economy, and then we got to the new millennium and it's like, ugh, here we are. That's why the stock market crashed. It was like, wait a minute, I'm no longer speculating on the future, I am in the future, here we are, what's happening? Right? And that's the millennial flip. Here we are, and we got 9/11 just to make sure we knew that something had changed. And we get this sense, we get what I call narrative collapse, where this whole notion of story, that same story that goes around the clock every minute, is the same kinds of stories that we use to understand ourselves religiously, spiritually, personally, as a nation, that we're moving towards this thing. We keep our eye on the prize and we get there. There's a winner and a loser. There's a war. There's the enemy. We're going to go have a campaign, beat the enemy, and we know when we've won. We're going to land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth. And we knew when we did it. We stuck the flag in the moon. We did it. We're there. We completed it. The story, crisis, climax, relief. It's the great Aristotelian curve, the great narrative arc, or what we can call the kind of the male orgasm curve that we've organized society around. Crisis, climax, sleep. Crisis, climax, sleep. So on a certain level, it's great to be liberated from that. Right? We've kept our eyes on the prize long enough. We've been led down these ridiculous campaigns and things don't change, right? It's the same narrative that's used by Stalin and Hitler and everybody else. Whether it's a good narrative or a bad narrative, we'll never know because it's just a great charismatic leader to march behind and to keep our eyes on the prize and to get to that ends justifies the means victory, right? The discontinuity of things like the remote control, the joystick, the DVR, breaks narrativity. They don't have narrative control over us anymore. We can choose our own adventure. We can make our own path. We can hyperlink to something else. Plus, we're in this type of time that doesn't support narrativity. It's always on, ever present. There is no tomorrow. It just is. Right? So it's great. It breaks the myths of the market. It breaks the myths of our campaigns. It falsifies that. And on the happy side, we get a kind of an infinite game where we're no longer playing the game in order to be the winner. Because if you're the winner, it ends the play. The game is over. Right? We start to see games and culture and entertainments and all sorts of activities where we're no longer playing to win because that ends it. Instead, we're playing in order to keep the game going. You look at fantasy role-playing games. Look at massive online player games. They're not playing to win. The creative act here, winning, means that we kept the game alive. How creative can we be? How long can we keep this game going? Which is much more consonant with the problems of our world today. It's not about beating some enemy. It's about keeping this thing going. It's about finding sustainable approaches to being a civilization, to being on this planet. But no, it's not what we use our technology for. That's not what we're not looking to digital technology to create these new sustainable, peer-to-peer, endless, infinite games. No, we're using digital technology to double down on the industrial age, and that's where we're really making a problem. We're saying, how can the digital technology save the stock market? How can it perpetuate growth? So we create things that extract value from people rather than creating value for people. Because the tools that we're building are not serving people. They're serving a share price. But that's their purpose. That's what they're legally obligated to do. So we create applications. The applications on your phone, you don't play these applications. The applications play you. Why do you think what sound does your email make when you don't have any email versus what sound it makes when you do? Oh, there's the sad bong. Oh, you didn't get anybody emailing you. And they work on that. That's worked on at Stanford in the captology lab. What's the saddest sound? What's the happiest sound we can make that they got something new? How can we create a motion that's going to be, that's going to work perfectly well with obsessive compulsive disorder? So that, oh, just drag down and get another message, get another message. And email dovetails perfectly with OCD. What is OCD? The real challenge of OCD is people are trying to find patterns in things that don't have patterns. That's what obsessive compulsive disorder is. That's why the slot machine, the one-armed bandit, works so well. You put in a quarter, nothing. Put in a quarter, nothing. Put in ooh, 3. All right, so your brain is saying, okay, every fourth one I'm going to get 3, and then you get 7, but then you get none. Your brain goes nuts because it's trying to find a pattern. Same with email. That's how email becomes addictive. Because every time you check your email, oh, that boring, 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 boring. Ooh, a date, or ooh, some money, or ooh, a job possibility. Ooh, a golf game. You know, they come in, but they come in randomly, and you don't know when, so we go into an obsessive loop in order to use it. And the apps know that. The apps are designed to exploit this, to exacerbate that tendency. Not the apps, the interfaces, the way they work, it's not to enhance their usability. Right? It's to enhance their ability to use you, to their ability to extract value from you. And you can't blame them. What's the purpose of the app? Especially when it's free. You're not the customer, right? You're the product. Or worse, you know, yeah, right, because they're delivering your data up to their people who are actually paying them. They're paying customers. You know, meanwhile, our technologies get smarter about us as we get dumber about them. We understand less and less how they're programmed. We're further and further. If you were in computing back in the days when I was, using a computer was programming a computer. Now it's like, you know, hazard warning. You'll get an electric shock if you go in there and try to, you know, rework your AutoExec bat file or something. Oh, what is that, right? What does Microsoft use to get you to install a program? The wizard. Right? Why did Microsoft pick the wizard? Not the helper, not the secretary, not paperclip man. No, only the wizard can take the application and move it into the applications folder. Because it's a mysterious process. You don't understand this. You're too dumb. You don't get it. Stay away. Right? But our technology gets smarter and smarter about us. It watches our every move, our every mouse click, how we're moving the cursor. It's not the people at Google and Facebook that are watching. It's the algorithms at those places that are watching, so they can better serve us. Right? And they're not, of course, they're not serving us, so they can actually serve their masters. Or you look at the use of algorithms on the stock market. What are those really for? How do algorithms create value for the economy? They don't. They extract value from the economy. That's what they're programmed to do. We all know now 80–90% of trades are algorithmic fakes. What does that mean? What is big data? You know, big data, or talk about a time loop, big data is Mark Zuckerberg on Facebook using my past in order to market to me my most probable future that I don't even know I'm going to live yet. Right? They're marketing your future to you before you get there, because they've used big data to find out, oh, you're in a category where 80% of people who have these 3 data points that you do decide to go on a diet. So what happens to your news feed? Oh, you're looking kind of fat, aren't you? Oh, have you heard about coronary? They're going to push you there because their object of the game for them is not just to advertise to the 80% of you who are going to do it, but to get that 20% who may have chosen to do some other thing to conform to their profile, to make us more predictable. So what's happening? The machines are trying to make us more like machines as they get smarter and smarter. You know, so they end up, we're using our technology to serve growth, really, to serve the growth narrative by reducing the human. We have to reduce the human to serve this very bizarre understanding of how the market works. And that's because what we're doing is we're optimizing our technology, or we're optimizing our human capacities. We're optimizing human beings for technology instead of optimizing technology for human beings. Now, when I talk to my peers about this, my cyber theory media scholar peers, they're like, don't worry. Computers are about to get smarter than people anyway. Right? The singularity is coming when computers can think. And after computers can think, human beings will only be important insofar as we can keep the machines going. that they are the future of evolution. And they tell the story of evolution as information is trying to evolve towards higher states of complexity. And it used molecules and matter, and then it used biology, and then it used people. But now it's going through technology, through silicon. And silicon is our successor. I say, no, it's not. You've got the medium and the message reversed. This information doesn't exist without the human mind to conceive it, to understand it, to behold it. And they say, oh, Doug, you only say that because you're human. As if it's hubris, right, to argue for humanity in the face of this. And I call it hubris, but I am firmly on team human. Right? If for no other reason than I happen to be a human. And I don't believe that these technologies actually bring what's best about humanity into this next realm. I don't think they see it. I think they're in the Chronos world of pure data and numbers and metrics, and they miss the squishy, weird stuff that actually makes human human. All that time between the ticks of the clock that the computer can't see is where we actually live. I watch a lot of these zombie movies today and zombie TV shows, and the fascination with zombies is the same thing as this bizarre obsession with the singularity. What zombie shows are really, we think of them as some nightmare, apocalyptic future. It's not. It's wish fulfillment. That's what people want. In the zombie apocalypse, there's no cell phone, there's no buzzing, there's no Twitter, there's no Facebook to deal with. There's nothing, there's no boss. You just sit on a mountain with your family and a shotgun, and there's slow-moving zombies on the horizon. You pick them off. Back to the good old days, It's weird that it's easier to envision that than 10 years from now, though, isn't it? 10 years, it's like, oh my God, that's stressful. I can get that. But the real theme of these zombie shows, the real problem with them is the characters can't distinguish between themselves and the zombies. That's what it's always about. You'll have a character, they're looking out the car, and they'll see a zombie on the horizon, and you look in the eyes of the character, and you see them, or they'll say it. What really is the difference between us and them? They kill, they eat, we eat. Are we any different? But we are different from the zombies. The fact that they can't see it is a sad indication of where we are as a species, where we are as a civilization, that we've so degraded and denounced the weird, inexplicable part that makes us human, that is if we can't quantify it, if we can't put our exact finger on it, then it doesn't exist. But the zombie faces, in a way, those are like the over-Botoxed faces. They're dead. They're dead, and we can kill ourselves like that too. The 94% of human communication that I'm talking about, it happens off the grid. It happens outside metrics. It's unmeasurable, but unmistakably real for those of us who are still alive. And I would argue that it's in that bizarre, essential weirdness that we actually have our power and that we have a chance at a human future. Okay, thanks very much. And now, as she comes in, now my good friend AmberCase. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. It's a real honor to be here. I have never visited this place before, and it is really beautiful. So thanks for hosting me here. I'd like to talk to you about a subject called cyborg anthropology, which is a study of the interaction between humans and technology. But first, I'd like it if all of you could hold up your phones really quickly. That's great. All right, the faster you held those up, the more cyborg you are. So Doug Ruskoff is probably he's the fastest draw in the West. Oh, there we go. There's the laggard. But in reality, we're all cyborgs. And I don't get this definition from Terminator or RoboCop. I get this definition from a 1965 paper on space travel, where the term was actually created. In fact, we don't have to be embedded with technology. We don't have to have chips in our brain. We've always been cyborgs since the earliest tools. Anytime we're in an interaction between us and technology, we're acting as a cyborg. So the actual definition of a cyborg is an organism to which some sort of external components have been added so that that organism can adapt to a new environment. Literally about somebody in a spacesuit in a hostile environment. So the whole idea is that we as humans add these tools to ourselves so that we can adapt to cold weather with a fire, or we can externalize our fist as a hammer, or if you're a saber-toothed tiger and you break your tooth, you can't regrow the tooth suddenly. But if you're a human and you make a knife outside of your body, it makes it very easy to cut something or make a new tool every time you lose it. So this is, for most of our existence, until we started doing cave painting and writing and externalizing our knowledge, all of our tools were physical extensions of the self. And now we have objects that are more and more invisible, mental extensions of the self. Now, whereas we had these tools that were stable for millions of years, that had the kind of same size and shape, a hammer is still the same shape as a hammer, it does the same function, we now have something that's a mental extension of ourselves that doesn't really have any set size and shape. Whereas we had papyrus scrolls and cave paintings, now we have these giant machines the size of gymnasiums, and then they've gone to these tiny little devices that don't really have the same form factor as we did in the beginning. We do have the same idea of scrolling. We had scrolls and now we scroll on our devices, but that's maybe the only similarity. So this is really what I'm interested in studying, this transition, because every time we get used to technology, it blends into our reality and becomes invisible. And once it becomes invisible, it's hard for us to notice because we live inside of it. So a traditional anthropologist usually goes to another country and says, hey, look at these people, how fascinating they are, how interesting their rituals, look at their kinship, look at how they use their tools, let's look at how they pass stories down to each other. For most of anthropological history, the field site was elsewhere. It was another country, it was another type of person. And then we brought back this knowledge. But a cyborg anthropologist looks at the world around them and says, how curious and fascinating these people are. They look at these small devices, our world of pads, tabs, and boards. We stare at these little magical devices that we can click once and be connected to all the way on the other side of the world, or see some live stream of something happening elsewhere. We're really kind of a magic portal community now, where we're all on these magic portals looking at different things. But this subject isn't actually that new. It started in 1941, where there were a number of technologists and anthropologists who got together and said, one day these devices, well, there weren't devices at the time, but one day computers are going to be small enough and they're going to kind of blend into the fabric of everyday life. How will that affect culture? How will that affect warfare? How will that affect our everyday lives? And people like Margaret Mead were there, founder of cybernetics was there. But it wasn't until 1992 that the cyborg anthropology was an actual subject that you could study. So that's how I came to it. My teacher was one of the founders of the field in college, and I said, this is great because it was just on the forefront of these phones in everybody's pockets, and I thought I wanted to figure out what the future of the interface was and the future of technology was. So of course I wrote my thesis by walking around and watching people on phones all day with a little notepad, which most people didn't notice at all because they're in their cell phones, so it didn't really matter. So let's talk a little bit about present day. We have these kind of Mary Poppins devices where there's this kind of automatic production of space. If you have a handbag, you can only put a number of things in it, or a backpack. But you can store lots and lots of photos and pictures of cats and news articles in your computer, and it doesn't get any heavier. And if you were to take all of that data you have out, it's so easy to put into it, and print it out, it would look something like this. This is actually a campaign for a hard drive about what happens when you lose all your data. This is actually 8 years of photos that have been printed out from somebody's hard drive. right? Technically, this looks like the house of a hoarder, right? Like, we've all kind of become hoarders. It's so easy to collect this information, and it's invisible that we don't notice that we say, oh, I need to keep that. I need to keep that too. And now cloud-based companies profit off of that. Oh, you need more space in the cloud. Well, it's very free to store it, but to access it is going to become very expensive. So instead of us trying to keep our houses clean, we end up being very messy, but because we can't see it, we don't really practice digital hygiene as much. I was at an art residency in Banff, in the Banff Institute in Canada, and I decided to take my Facebook wall and print it out the size of a wall and install it. So this was an installation where I put my Facebook wall on a wall, because I was thinking, what other culture has a wall that looks like this, where all of your minutia suddenly becomes very important for a group of people? And I thought of the Egyptians, where you have the pharaoh and all this stuff inscribed. The pharaoh went to the market today. The pharaoh traded 6 fish for 5 antelope. These like minutia. It's basically a status update. I thought, well, this might last for 3,000 years. This is stored in light on a server somewhere. It doesn't really exist, but everybody has one now. Everybody has their own Egyptian tomb temple of their minutia, right? But then I thought about what happens when all these things that are stored in nowhere go away. And I thought about the idea of a digital dark age, where how do we preserve this data? Does it actually exist? Right now it doesn't really. Are we going to be printing out our photos and putting it into photo albums? Are we going to have a physical representation of the things that we created online or not? And there's a foundation called the Long Now Foundation, which is all about preserving things for 10,000 years. They have this kind of Rosetta Stone cut into metal, which is all about having something preserved for a very long time. It's actually these it's like 20 languages, and then they get smaller and smaller around this little spiral. And then you have to use a higher and higher amount of technology in order to access that as you go around. So if somebody finds it in 10,000 years, in order to decode it, they have to keep developing their technology to do it. So it's kind of like teaching future generations how to decode something so that they can have this big new Rosetta Stone. The other thing about storing information elsewhere outside of yourself is that you start to have these kind of hyperlinked memories, where you're sending somebody a hyperlink to a memory inside your brain, where you see groups of students look for different YouTube videos, and the social currency is the YouTube video that they might share. And I also find that we're becoming kind of persistent paleontologists, where there's this field side of our email account that all this dust keeps layering on of new mail, and we have to figure out the search term to go in and find that piece of mail that we had before. It's like digging through this pile of dirt every single time we need to do something. And when Ruskoff talks about present shock, I always think of simultaneous time, where all these different sites that we're a part of and all these different notification systems put us into this kind of simultaneous time zone. We're not really in one place, we're in multiple places at once. And any of those could bring us to some moment of social punctuation, where our real moment, our real reality gets interrupted by some other thing that's happening in some other time zone on some other piece of information that's going on at that time. And when all of these things converge, I call this kind of architecture of panic, where we're constantly having this panic. But on the other hand, even when we're in places that don't feel like real places, we can kind of have this ambient intimacy in which your phone can, at any point in time, give you access to anybody. If you were to take all the people in your phone and print them out right now, depending on your phone, it might look like this. All of these people are in everybody's phones, representing some connection that you might have loosely. And that allows us to deal with spaces that are not built for humans, like traffic jams. The identification of a place is something in which you have relation to somebody, you have an identity, you have some sort of history. And a lot of our places in industrial society have taken that away. We don't have identity in relation to others when we're in a traffic jam. We don't have relation to that road, really. We don't have any history. Same with an airport. And so what do people do when they get into traffic jams or airports? They use technology to give them back a place that they got taken away from them, because there's all these places that aren't built for humans. They're built at car scale. They're built at transportation scale. So next, talking a little bit about how kids grow up online. So becoming a cyborg. The concept of the second self. Infants, often people are making Twitter accounts for their kids before they're even born. which is really strange because what happens when the kid is old enough to take over that account? They have this whole history. I like the concept of the second self from Sherry Turkle because it allows you to represent whatever type of self you want online. I think of it as, the man behind the curtain pressing the buttons in The Wizard of Oz, and it's Oz the Great and Terrible, this hologram, but in reality it's somebody pushing buttons behind the scenes. But I also think of this as kind of an interface for social grooming, where before you might have people hugging each other, but now you have a dopamine hit that comes about when you comment on somebody's wall. And then, of course, presentation of self in digital life becomes important. Irving Goffman, who's an anthropologist, talked about the presentation of self in everyday life. How do you present yourself in different environments? If you're a father, or if you're an employee, or if you're a husband, all of these different things are different ways that you present yourself. But in the digital world, you do the same thing. You have your LinkedIn presence where you're professional. You have your Facebook voice. You have your Twitter voice. You have the email voice that you use. And so we kind of have that shifting over into this space as well. And of course, there's these type of psychological effects that are mapped into our brains now, so that there's really no difference between getting something online that's a positive comment and getting a positive comment from somebody in the real world. I really liked this conference in 2009 called The Internet as Playground and Factory, which was all about free labor. When Foursquare came out, you got points in the system for putting in database venues. So basically, it wasn't the company of 14 people that was actually making the database. It was the entire world were technically the employees. And then I thought about how kids are no longer having giant backyards and going out into the woods to play. Now, instead, they're usually in cities and they can't really explore because it's dangerous. So what do if they don't have any prospects for graduating from school or a career? They end up playing these games because the games give them meaning. They give them a place, they give them relation, identity, history. They give them the ability to have a set of rewards that are faster than you could get in real life. And then I think of this whole thing as just a kind of spreadsheet game. Let me check my stats in the spreadsheet. Oh, this column went up, this column went down. I need to adjust how I'm doing things. And then again, that social grooming starts to help that out, and then you get the psychological effects. Where we had the analog backyards before, now we have the concept of digital backyards, where there are no borders and there are no passports needed, and you're working with people from all over the world. And this is kind of training people to be able to organize and play with people around the world. These are going to be the future remote workers that are working with various different people around the world. I watch kids play Minecraft, and one of the reasons why Minecraft is so addicting and important is it's an infinite box of Legos that you can play with anybody else in the world. People are building analog computers in this game, and the first thing that you do in Minecraft is just try to stay alive for the first night, because there are these creepers that come out and try to kill you. So you have to create this very bare minimum structure to survive, and that bonds your brain into the game more than you would in real life. It's like a camping adventure suddenly, and you're stuck with no resources. You have to collect the resources and do something. And so just from getting that out of the game, you're bonded to it. It's really hard to get that much out in real life today because a lot of kids are so sheltered from having to survive. And so they turn to these things because it gives them more meaning. In terms of information overload, now we have, I just call it information junk food. It's fast food. Click the button, get more information. It's that infinite feast that you turn to and you get stuck on the island in the Greek myth where you can't turn away because there's more information coming, there's more food coming. And one of the issues is that your stomach knows when you're full, but your brain doesn't have a latch that says, hey, your brain is full, stop. Stop binge watching Netflix, stop going on Wikipedia for hours. It's like the whole of the internet is this one run-on sentence with no punctuation, and you don't know when to stop, and there aren't commercial breaks. And of course, what Ruskoff was talking about is the idea of us becoming Skinnerian rats, which is, if you give a rat a lever and every once in a while you get food, then the rat will press the button all day instead of 3 times a day. We used to know when mail was coming. It would come once a day, and not on Sundays. But now, any information could come at any point in time. Lisa Reichelt calls this continuous partial attention, or presence light, that we're not there all the time, fully present. We're just kind of present at some point in time. And the problem is with this fragmented system, the boundaries between work and play, friends and family and coworkers, everything starts to blend, night and day, off time and on time. And suddenly we don't have these well-defined boundaries with breaks, with vacations. We become overburdened and we become very fragmented. And we miss out on that quiet time at the end of the day watching a sunset on the front porch in a small town in which you have the idea of self-reflection or journaling or figuring out and processing what was in your brain. It's constantly about now. I think about it like mental defragmentation. If you've had an older computer and you run the memory defragmentation, it looks like this. I used to watch computers defragmenting themselves all the time when I was a kid. I was really excited about looking at how the software was optimizing itself. And then I tried to go to sleep at night, and my dad said, well, you just have to shut down all the programs in your brain in order to go to sleep. So I would sit there and shut down eyesight and hearing and all the different senses one by one and watch them shut down and then go into conscious REM, which was really fun because then I could play around in my dreams. I didn't know what I was doing. I really wanted to figure out how similar my brain was to a computer. But then I realized that sleeping is where you get this kind of digital defragmentation for your brain. You're optimizing files, you're archiving information. When I started analyzing my dreams like that, it was fairly simple. I went to 10 different schools, and in my brain, they all got pushed into one building. And I realized, oh, well, that's just memory archiving. It's more efficient for my brain to store them as one building. Oh, interesting. So then I thought about all the nights that I didn't have sleep and how all of these other memories and programs were still running when I woke up, and how it actually depleted my ability to write new memories to my brain. So this was kind of interesting. I thought of, what's the only time in which people get digital downtime? It's when you put your phone into airplane mode on a plane. But now you have internet, so you can't do that anymore. But then I realized that, after I started reading some Xerox PARC history, this guy named Mark Weiser came up with this idea of a different kind of technology. He said that the scarce resource in the future is not going to be technology, it's going to be information, or it's going to be attention. And that our scarcity of attention is going to mean that we need to design systems that don't take up all of our attention. In fact, we don't need more technology, we need a calm technology. We need to remove the pieces until there's nothing left to take away. And that we need to have technology that gets out of the way and let us live our lives. But the issue is that often we have this technology that gets in the way, and technology tries to act human, and that's when we get in these uncanny valley traps, where you have, only if you see these videos of somebody in a perfect condominium in San Francisco with a perfect San Francisco American accent, and they're talking to their computer in a human voice, and the computer perfectly understands. It's not like when you talk to Siri and, hey, I need directions to the sandwich shop. They're like, what, you want a bagel? Or, I don't understand that. You're yelling at it again and again. When technology tries to act like a human, humans end up acting like technology. They repeat themselves. So if you look at Google Search doesn't tell you the exact result. It connects you to data that other people have created and sorts it for you so that you as a human, the curator, that's the human superpower, the creative, the curator, can say what actually matches you because you carry the context. And so Google Search is actually really good technology. It really is a calm technology because it allows you to be you, amplifies your humanness, and then uses a bunch of bots in the background to amplify what computers are good at, which is getting all those results and indexing and sifting through lots of data. And so if we keep having these technologies that try to act like humans, we end up getting stuck. I actually got stuck at a border control once because I had a ticket that was bent, and the machine scanner wouldn't take it. And so I got stuck, and I looked for the cameras, and there was no one there. And I started making a scene, waving around, trying to get the camera's attention. And finally, somebody came out from some disguised door and said, oh, sorry about that. I was on break, and I could have missed my flight. So the issue is that people keep saying, well, let's automate everything and not have a human in the loop. We need to have people watching the machines, using context, disambiguating. We're not going to have artificial intelligence replace us because it's always been symbiotic with us. Right now, when the economy is really good, the technology serves advertising needs, but when the economy changes, we'll have different technology that comes up. So in conclusion, it's really important to look at attention as a resource and try to design things that are simple. Otherwise, we're going to have a kind of lag that happens where we're going to be catching up with all of this other technology that's been built before us with these complicated systems that we no longer know how to use. And then we'll get caught into the technology trap of not understanding the things that we built. So thank you very much.